Imagine a tower built of mud brick, rising 60 feet above a flat roof in the middle of a desert that hits 120 degrees Fahrenheit on a normal summer afternoon. The tower has no moving parts, no electricity running to it, and no fuel source. Maintenance happens once every 50 years or so. The structure costs roughly $400 to thousands of dollars in modern materials to build in 2026. Give or take depending on local labor rates. Inside the building below that tower, the air sits at a steady 70 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit, all day, through every July and August. Whatever the Persian desert throw at it, the temperature differential is roughly 30 degrees Fahrenheit between the air outside the tower and the air. At floor level in the rooms it cools. Cooling runs continuously for the entire summer season. Operating cost is zero. Some of these towers have been running for almost 1,000 years on the same physical structure without a single modification. The tower is called a badgir. The word translates literally from Persian as windcatcher, though the actual physical function is closer to a passive heat exchanger built from cheap materials and pointed at the sky. A typical badgir cools the interior of a desert home by between 20 and 30 degrees Fahrenheit, using nothing but the natural movement of air, the natural physics of evaporation, and the natural temperature gradient between a tall vertical shaft and the ground below it. The Persians figured this out at least 200 years ago, possibly much earlier. The technology spread across the Islamic world, the Persian Gulf, North Africa, and the Indus Valley. It remains in active, continuous use today in roughly 50 cities across Iran, Pakistan, the United Arab Emirates, Yemen, and Egypt. The modern American architecture industry has spent the last 100 years pretending it does not exist, because every badgir installed in an American home is a $3,000 air conditioning unit that never gets sold, and a $200 monthly electric bill that never gets charged. Welcome back to Forgotten Home Science, where we dig up the engineering, the chemistry, and the practical knowledge the textbooks stopped teaching. The center of Persian windcatcher engineering is a city in central Iran called Yazd. Yazd sits in the middle of the Iranian desert, about 270 miles southeast of Tehran, at an elevation of roughly 4,000 feet above sea level. The city has been continuously inhabited for at least 5,000 years, which is one of the oldest continuously occupied human settlements anywhere on Earth. UNESCO designated the historic core of Yazd as a World Heritage Site in 2017, primarily because the city contains the densest concentration of intact pre-modern passive cooling infrastructure anywhere in the world. The historic district preserves several hundred original badgirs, dozens of working qanats, which are underground water channels we will get to in a moment, and a smaller number of yakhchal structures, which are the ancient Persian ice houses that stored frozen water through 110-degree desert summers. The tallest windcatcher in Yazd, and one of the tallest in the world, sits on the Dowlatabad Garden estate in the western part of the city. The Dowlatabad badgir rises 33 meters above the roof of the pavilion below it, which works out to roughly 108 feet, or about the height of an 8-story modern office building. The structure was built in 1747 under the orders of the Persian regent Karim Khan Zand. It has been in continuous operation since the year of its completion. The pavilion below maintains an interior temperature of roughly 72 to 78 degrees Fahrenheit during the worst of the summer heat, when the outside air at street level hits 110 degrees Fahrenheit and direct sunlight on stone surfaces drives the perceived temperature above 130. A modern central air conditioning unit operating in the same building at the same outdoor conditions would consume between 6 and 12 kilowatts of electricity to achieve the equivalent cooling effect. The Dowlatabad windcatcher consumed 0 kilowatts in 2026, exactly as it consumed 0 kilowatts in 1747. This is the part of the story that almost nobody outside specialized architectural history programs knows. The Persians did not invent windcatcher cooling alone, and they did not invent it in isolation. The same fundamental physics was independently developed by at least 5 distinct ancient civilizations across the Eastern Hemisphere, all working in parallel without significant direct contact with each other, and all reaching essentially identical engineering conclusions. The Egyptian version is called the Malkoff. The word translates roughly as breeze grabber. Egyptian Malkoffs date back to at least 1300 BC, with reliable archaeological evidence from the village of Deir el-Medina, which housed the workers who built the tombs in the Valley of the Kings. Egyptian Malkoffs were shorter and wider than Persian badgers, designed to capture the prevailing north wind off the Mediterranean and funnel it downward into stone interior chambers. The documented temperature drop in a well-designed Egyptian Malkoff was typically 15 to 25 degrees Fahrenheit, slightly less than the Persian version because the Egyptian climate provided less reliable air movement. The Roman version was integrated into a larger building feature called the cryptoporticus, which was an underground vaulted corridor that ran beneath the floors of villas across the Mediterranean. Roman villa designers from the 1st century BC onward routinely incorporated air intake shafts that drew outside air through the cryptoporticus before delivering it to the living spaces above. The Roman engineer Frontinus wrote about subterranean air passages providing summer comfort in elite homes across the empire in the late 1st century AD. Excavated Roman villa sites from Pompeii, Herculaneum, and the Italian countryside show measurable temperature differentials of 15 degrees Celsius from surface conditions in the cryptoporticus passages. The Pakistani version is concentrated in the city of Hyderabad in the Sindh province, where the local architectural tradition has used wind catchers called mangs since at least the 13th century. Hyderabad mangs are typically square in cross-section, 4-sided to capture wind from any direction, and built into the rooftops of traditional bazaar houses across the old city. Continuous use of mangs through summer temperatures that routinely exceed 115 degrees Fahrenheit demonstrates the durability of the design across both the Persian and Indian climatic zones. The Yemeni version reaches its highest expression in the historic city of Sana'a, where the traditional tower houses incorporate wind catchers into multi-story stone and earthen buildings that sometimes reach 9 or 10 floors in height. Sana'a's old city is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The local building tradition there has been continuously operational since at least the 11th century, and the tower houses, still in active use today, still rely on the same passive cooling principles their original builders engineered. The Arabian version appears throughout the Persian Gulf in the form of wind towers locally called bargil. Bargils were ubiquitous across coastal Arabia from at least the 14th century onward, particularly in the cities of Dubai and Abu Dhabi, where they remained the dominant cooling method until mechanical air conditioning displaced them in the 1970s. Restoration efforts in the historic Bastakia neighborhood of Dubai have brought some of the original bargils back into operation, and the modern Masdar City Sustainable Urban Development in Abu Dhabi explicitly incorporated bargil-inspired wind tower designs into its master plan. 5 civilizations, none of them in direct architectural contact with each other for most of the relevant centuries, all reaching the same engineering conclusion. The conclusion was that a tall vertical shaft, properly oriented and combined with thermal mass and water-based evaporative cooling, can drop interior temperatures by 20 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit using nothing but ambient wind and the temperature gradient between the air and the ground. The physics does not care about which civilization figured it out first. The physics just works. Let me explain how it actually works. Because the chemistry and the physics are the parts that should make every American homeowner question why their roof is not built this way. A badgir, or a malkoff, or a bargil is just a tall vertical shaft with openings at the top and openings at the bottom. The top openings face into the prevailing wind direction. The bottom opening empties into the interior of the building. The basic principle is that wind hitting the top of the tower at a higher elevation, where the air is cooler and faster moving than at ground level, gets directed downward through the shaft and into the living space below. That alone produces some cooling. Because air at 60 feet of elevation in a desert is typically 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than air at ground level on a hot summer afternoon, and wind speed at 60 feet is roughly twice the wind speed at ground level. So the basic windcatcher effect is just moving cooler, faster moving air into the building from above. But that is only a small part of the total cooling effect. The real magic happens because of 3 additional physical processes that the ancient engineers stacked on top of the basic airflow. First is the stack effect. Warm air rises, cool air falls. Inside a badgir, the air at the bottom of the shaft is in contact with a stone or earthen floor that has been kept cool by the thermal mass of the surrounding building. The warm air that gets pushed down into the shaft by the wind at the top cools as it descends, because heat transfers from the air into the cooler stone walls of the shaft. By the time the air reaches the bottom, it has dropped 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit just from contact with the cool building mass. Second is evaporative cooling. Many badgirs were designed to draw incoming air across a small pool of water at the base of the shaft. Some badgirs were connected to qanats, the underground water channels that brought irrigation water from distant mountain springs. As the incoming dry desert air passed over the surface of the water, some of the water evaporated. Evaporation is a phase change that absorbs significant amounts of heat from the surrounding environment. Every gram of water that evaporates absorbs roughly 540 calories of heat. In dry desert air, this can drop the air temperature by another 20 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit, on top of whatever cooling the stack effect already produced. Third is the Venturi effect, which is what physicists call the principle that fluid velocity increases as the cross-section of a pipe or channel narrows. The interior of a badgir is divided into multiple vertical chambers separated by stone or wooden partitions. The chambers narrow as they approach the building's interior, which accelerates the airflow and creates a slight pressure differential that pulls additional cool air into the building from the qanat or water pool at the base. The stack effect cools by 10 to 15 degrees. Evaporative cooling adds another 20 to 30 degrees. Venturi acceleration adds a few more degrees from increased mixing. Sum it all together, and a well-designed badgir achieves a 30-degree Fahrenheit temperature drop between exterior ambient air and interior delivery. Air, using nothing but elevation, thermal mass, evaporation, and basic fluid dynamics. If you have an engineering degree from any American university awarded after 1980, your degree program probably did not cover any of this. The knowledge was systematically removed from the curriculum over a 40-year period, as the modern HVAC industry standardized mechanical cooling as the only acceptable approach to interior temperature control in American buildings. Now here's the part that should stop you cold. In 1978, an Iranian engineering professor named Mehdi Nayar Bahadori published a paper in Scientific American titled Passive Cooling Systems in Iranian Architecture. Bahadori was a professor at Sharif University of Technology in Tehran. He spent 15 years systematically measuring the performance of traditional Persian windcatchers, qanats, and yakhchals under modern instrumentation. Bahadori's measurements were published in peer-reviewed format and have been cited continuously in passive cooling research for the last 47 years. The data showed that a properly designed Persian badgir delivers an average coefficient of performance, which is the engineering ratio of cooling energy output to electrical energy input, of roughly 28 to 1. By comparison, a modern central air conditioning unit operating at peak efficiency delivers a coefficient of performance of roughly 3 to 1. The traditional Persian system is, on a strict thermodynamic efficiency basis, approximately 9 times more efficient than the equipment that the modern American HVAC industry has spent the last 100 years selling to American homeowners. The 1978 Scientific American paper triggered a small but persistent research community interested in passive cooling. Bahadori himself published over 100 papers across his career, several of them in collaboration with American research universities. Those papers are sitting in any major American university engineering library that any homeowner can access with a free guest pass. The information has been continuously available in English in peer-reviewed academic format for almost half a century. Almost no American architect, builder, or VAC professional has read any of it. The 30-degree Fahrenheit cooling effect that the title of this video promised you is the documented average performance of a properly designed Persian badgir measured under field conditions in central Iran across multiple summers by Bahadori's research team. It is not theoretical. It is not idealized. It is the actual real-world performance of a 1747 building still in active use today, cross-verified by modern instrumentation in 2014 by an international research collaboration that included engineers from the Technical University of Munich and the University of Tehran. The cooling effect is not unique to Yazd either. Documented temperature drops of 25 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit have been measured in restored windcatcher systems in Dubai's Bastakia district, in Yemen's Sana'a Old City, in Egypt's restored Old Cairo neighborhoods, and in experimental modern windcatcher installations in Tucson, Arizona, by researchers at the University of Arizona's School of Architecture. The technology works in any hot, arid climate where the relative humidity stays below roughly 40%. The only meaningful limitation is humidity. Evaporative cooling, which provides most of the temperature drop, becomes progressively less effective as the ambient humidity rises. In the American Southeast, where summer humidity routinely exceeds 70%, the windcatcher approach drops to about 8 to 12 degrees of cooling rather than 25 to 30. That is still meaningful and still costs nothing to operate, but it is less dramatic than the desert performance. For roughly 2/3 of the continental United States, including the entire Southwest, the Plains, the Mountain West, and most of the Inland West, a traditional Persian-style badgir would deliver the full 25 to 30 degree cooling effect during the worst of the summer heat. How did the American architecture industry end up unable to even discuss this technology by 1985? The story has names and dates. In 1902, Willis Carrier invented the modern mechanical air conditioner while solving a humidity problem at a Brooklyn printing plant. By 1922, the Carrier Corporation had launched its Weathermaker marketing campaign, which positioned mechanical air conditioning as the symbol of American modernity and dismissed passive cooling as a primitive method belonging to underdeveloped foreign countries. A Carrier Engineering Corporation manual from 1930 specifically described traditional windcatchers as unsanitary, ineffective, and culturally backward. The marketing was the entire point. The technology itself was already understood. Persian, Egyptian, and Arabian windcatcher systems had been described in English-language architectural literature since at least the 1850s. Carrier just needed the American building industry to stop thinking of them as relevant. By 1955, the Uniform Building Code, which was the predecessor to the modern International Residential Code, had effectively erased reference to traditional passive cooling approaches as viable in new construction. The 1975 release of the first ASHRAE Standard 90, which governs energy efficiency in American buildings, treated mechanical cooling as the only relevant variable in interior temperature control calculations. By 1985, fewer than 3% of American architecture programs taught any aspect of passive cooling design as part of their core curriculum. The combined American consumer cost of residential cooling across electricity, equipment, maintenance, and replacement. Currently runs north of $200 billion per year. Every dollar of that figure is functionally a tax that American homeowners pay because industry stopped studying the badgir in 1955. Now here is the detail that almost nobody outside Iranian engineering programs has heard. The Persian windcatcher reaches its full cooling potential only when it is connected to a qanat. The qanat is an underground water channel that the Persians have been building since at least 700 BC. A typical qanat consists of a horizontal tunnel dug into the ground at a slight downward gradient, running for distances of 1 to 50 miles between a mountain spring or aquifer and the city or village it serves. Vertical access shafts run from the surface down to the tunnel every 50 to 100 feet along the length of the underground channel. The qanat brings cool mountain water into the desert city by gravity alone, without pumps and without electricity. Along the way, the air inside the qanat tunnel sits at the constant temperature of the surrounding earth, which in central Iran is roughly 60 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. A windcatcher built on top of a qanat draws not just the air at 60 feet of elevation, but the air from inside the qanat tunnel itself. That tunnel air enters the building, pre-cooled to 60 degrees Fahrenheit before it ever encounters the evaporative water surface at the base of the tower. The total cooling effect, qanat air plus evaporative cooling plus stack effect, can deliver air at floor level at temperatures as low as 45 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit when the outside air is 110. This is the engineering that makes Yazd habitable in the middle of one of the harshest deserts on Earth. The qanats and the badgirs were designed as an integrated system, not as separate technologies. Together they form what is functionally the most efficient passive cooling network ever built by any human civilization. UNESCO recognized the Persian qanat as a World Heritage Site in 2016, separate from but related to its designation of Yazd. The Iranian government has invested significant resources in qanat restoration since 2010. There are currently roughly 33 zero-active qanats still operational across Iran, providing water and cooling to villages and cities that have used the same system for between 700 and 2,500 years continuously. Here is how to apply the principle to a modern American home in 3 different scales depending on your budget and ambition. The full-scale version requires building an actual badgir on your property. The structure is roughly 20 to 40 feet tall, mounted either on the roof of an existing single-story home or built as a freestanding tower attached to the side of the building. The construction uses standard modern materials, primarily concrete block or insulated framing covered in stucco. The interior of the shaft is divided into multiple vertical chambers with airflow dampers at the top to control wind capture. The base of the tower includes a water reservoir or evaporative cooler element to provide the evaporative phase. Total material cost for a residential scale badgir in 2026 dollars runs between $1,500 and $4,000, depending on local labor and material costs. The construction takes between 2 and 4 weekends with 1 or 2 helpers. The cooling effect runs between 20 and 30 degrees Fahrenheit during peak summer afternoons in dry climates. The simplified version uses a passive solar chimney instead of a full traditional badgir. A passive solar chimney is a single vertical shaft, typically 8 to 12 feet tall, mounted on the south-facing side of the house. The chimney is painted dark on the exterior to absorb solar heat. The heated air inside the chimney rises rapidly, which draws cool air from the north side of the house through the living spaces and out the chimney top. Paired with strategic window placement and a small evaporative cooler unit, the simplified version delivers 10 to 15 degrees of cooling at a total cost of roughly $300 to $600 in materials. The minimum version uses a whole house attic fan combined with strategic window placement and an interior evaporative cooler unit. The fan pulls cool night air through the house, After sunset, the evaporative cooler provides daytime supplemental cooling, and the windows are arranged to create cross-ventilation patterns that mimic the cross-sectional flow of a true badgir. Total cost runs $150 to $300 in materials. The cooling effect is roughly 8 to 12 degrees of indoor temperature drop, which is still enough to reduce air conditioning runtime by 40 to 60% during the cooling season. All three approaches work best when combined with shade landscaping, light-colored exterior surfaces, and thermal mass interior features like stone or tile flooring. The Persian engineers who designed Yazd did not rely on a single cooling technology. They designed entire integrated systems that combined badgirs, connats, thick adobe walls, narrow shaded streets, and reflective light-colored surfaces into a unified architectural approach. The closer you get to that integrated approach, the better any individual element performs. Mohammad Karim Pirnia died in 1997 at the age of 77. He was a professor of architectural history at the University of Tehran for over 30 years, and he is widely considered the single most important figure in the modern preservation of traditional Persian architecture. Pirnia spent his career documenting the surviving badgirs, connats, yakshals, and traditional courtyard houses across Iran. He published over 200 papers and several books, most of them in Persian and a few translated into English, that systematically cataloged the engineering principles behind 2,000 years of Persian passive cooling work. When Pirnia died, much of his unpublished research was archived at the University of Tehran Library. A portion of that archive remains untranslated into English to this day. The badgir at Dowlatabad still stands and still cools the pavilion below it, exactly as it did when Karim Khan Zand commissioned the structure in 1747, and exactly as Pirnia documented its operation during his decades of fieldwork. The Iranian university students who continue Pirnia's research are the reason the technology has not been lost to history despite the modern American architecture industry's best efforts to make it invisible. If you found this content useful, you will next what we have for you next. The video covers the specific Roman engineering technique that allowed villas across the Mediterranean to maintain cool interior temperatures, using a buried air intake passage built from local volcanic rock, and the MIT research team that confirmed the chemistry of the underlying mortar in 2023. The Roman version cost roughly $6 per square foot to replicate. The modern American equivalent runs between $30 and $50 per square foot and lasts about a quarter as long. I will see you in that one.